Two viruses can infect the same maize plant, and each one on its own looks manageable. Mild mosaic symptoms, moderate growth stress. But when both land in the same plant, the crop can die within weeks. Maize supplies roughly 40 to 50% of daily calories across Eastern Africa. This is not a niche agronomy problem. It is a food security and financial stability crisis, happening at the same time. The disease is called Maize Lethal Necrosis, and the biology is harsh enough on its own. What makes this crisis different is the financial system wrapped around it. The institutions built to help farmers recover often push them back into the exact behavior that keeps the disease alive. That is the paradox at the center of this story. In this episode, we trace how biology, seed markets, and credit rules became one self-reinforcing trap. MLN is unusual because a single pathogen does not cause it. It requires co-infection, meaning two viruses must infect one plant at the same time. The first is maize chlorotic mottle virus, known as MCMV. The second is usually from the Podiviridae family, most commonly sugarcane mosaic virus in East Africa. On their own, those viruses produce relatively mild symptoms and moderate growth stress. Together, they overwhelm antiviral defenses and let MCMV replicate at an explosive rate. The plant then moves into systemic necrosis, chlorotic mottling, severe stunting, and ear barrenness. In susceptible hybrids, losses range from around 30% to total crop failure. Under heavy pressure, entire fields get wiped out. MCMV was first identified in Peru in 1971. During the late 1970s, it appeared in Kansas and Nebraska, where the synergistic disease became known as corn lethal necrosis. For years, crop rotation kept spread relatively constrained. That containment ended in September 2011. A major outbreak in Longisa Division, Bomet District, Kenya, confirmed MLN in Africa for the first time. By 2012, Kenya had already lost about 126,000 metric tons of maize, valued near $52 million. One cycle later, losses rose to roughly 500,000 tons, with damage approaching $180 million. Across approximately 60,000 hectares in Kenya alone, the outbreak drove a 10% drop in projected national maize output. That speed shocked both policymakers and commercial seed systems. The outbreak had moved from anomaly to structural threat. Spread then accelerated across borders. Between 2012 and 2015, confirmations came from Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. Regional economic losses landed between $291 million and $339 million. The damage was not evenly distributed, which made national averages understate local collapse. Some counties absorbed hits severe enough to resemble localized recessions. Kenya's 2014 long-range data shows the concentration. Trans Nzoia lost about $15.7 million, with around 12% of planted area affected. Narok absorbed roughly $9.7 million in losses, and Kericho about $8.3 million. Those are not marginal adjustments for rural economies. They are destabilizing shocks in a single season. Now look at transmission mechanics. MCMV rides on thrips, especially Frankliniella williamsi, which transmit the virus at a 78% efficacy rate. Aphids, rootworms, and leaf beetles also contribute. Podivirus partners move mainly through aphid feeding. Field pressure depends on both pathogen presence and vector ecology. One discovery made this worse. MCMV-infected plants alter their volatile organic compound emissions, including beta-myrcene. That chemical signal attracts thrips. In simple terms, the infected plant helps recruit the very insect that spreads the infection. The pathogen effectively manipulates plant chemistry to extend its own reach. Soil persistence adds another layer. MCMV can remain viable in decomposing crop residue for up to 49 days after harvest. That means insect control alone cannot eliminate risk. The pathogen bridges seasons through residue pathways. Management has to address both above-ground and below-ground controls. Seed transmission closes the loop. At a rate of just 0.01%, a commercial field of around 55,000 plants per hectare still starts with about 5 to 6 infected plants. With active vectors present, those few plants can trigger localized epidemic growth. A tiny seed-level signal becomes a large, field-level event. That is why seed quality is central, not optional. And this is where the financial paradox starts. The best long-run defense is clean, certified MLN-resistant seed. But formal seed systems in Eastern Africa face slow varietal turnover and high approval friction. Even when CIMMYT and CalRO identify resistant lines, moving from lab to farm takes years. Biology moves quickly, while regulation moves slowly. Cross-border approval rules deepen that delay. A resistant variety cleared in Kenya does not automatically move into Uganda or Tanzania. It must pass separate national testing and registration pathways. Yet the pathogen crosses borders without waiting for paperwork. The threat is regional, but the solution pipeline remains fragmented by country. Phytosanitary standards are scientifically defensible, but financially punishing. National plant protection organizations enforce up to 1% infection tolerance in seed production fields. At laboratory stage, tolerance drops to absolute zero for MLN viruses. Any lot above threshold gets rejected and destroyed. Epidemiology improves, while supply economics tighten. Small and medium seed firms absorb most of that shock. Rejected inventory destroys working capital and forces emergency sourcing. Kenya now imports roughly 10 to 15% of certified seed volumes from non-endemic origins like Zambia and South Africa. Those import costs flow directly to farmers. Higher seed prices then push adoption down. When certified seed becomes unaffordable, growers move to informal channels. Across East Africa, informal seed accounts for roughly 60 to 80% of planted material. In some rural Tanzanian districts, that figure climbs to 95%. These channels include farm-saved seed, farmer exchanges, and grain market planting stock. Most of it bypasses phytosanitary control entirely. That creates a hidden reservoir. Grain harvested from mildly infected fields can carry MCMV internally. When that grain is replanted, the pathogen re-enters at the start of the next cycle. Farmers are not choosing risk because they prefer it. They are choosing what they can afford. Counterfeit seed then amplifies the same vulnerability. Uganda's Standards Authority estimates roughly 30 to 40% of open market seed is counterfeit. Kenya and Tanzania report rates that often approach 40%. Globally, the World Bank values agricultural counterfeiting near $1.7 billion. Across sub-Saharan Africa, this pushes yields below 1/5 of potential in affected channels. The fraud methods are sophisticated. Counterfeiters collect discarded branded packaging and refill it with uncertified grain. Some dye ordinary grain with industrial colorants to mimic treated seed. Others relabel expired varieties as premium MLN-resistant hybrids. Farmers discover the fraud only after establishment failure or total collapse. Income impacts are severe. Reported losses can reach 60%, and worst-case failures approach 90%. At that level, the problem is no longer just agronomic. It becomes household solvency, social stability, and food access. The disease burden and fraud burden stack together. Formal credit should buffer this kind of shock, but access is limited. Agriculture contributes the largest share of Kenya's GDP and employs over 40% of the population. Yet in 2020, agriculture received only about 3.6% of total commercial lending. When MLN wipes out harvest cash flow, repayment collapses quickly. The system tightens exactly when resilience investment is most needed. Evidence from Kenya's Agricultural Finance Corporation in the Mount Kenya region illustrates the spiral. Reported repayment sat at only 20.33% versus the central bank benchmark default tolerance of 10%. Lenders reacted with higher rates, tighter collateral, and lower sector exposure. Farmers then lost the ability to buy certified resistant seed. Credit withdrawal became a biological risk driver. SACCOs, savings and credit cooperatives, face similar dynamics. If an outbreak hits one district, many members default at once. Depositors then withdraw savings for immediate food needs, creating a liquidity squeeze. SACCOs lack central bank lender of last resort support, so emergency liquidity is limited. New lending freezes, and trust deteriorates fast. That creates a true catch-22. Crop loss causes default. Default blocks new credit. No credit means no verified resistant seed. Farmers then buy cheap unverified seed or replant infected grain because planting cannot be skipped. Those choices raise MLN probability in the next season. Financial constraints stop being passive exposure and become active transmission pathways. There are real advances on the science side. CIMMYT and KALRO opened the Naivasha MLN screening facility in 2013 as a quarantine testing platform. It has screened more than 221,450 germplasm entries across over 343,000 rows. Marker-assisted backcrossing converted over 50 elite susceptible inbred lines into resistant versions. More than 22 tolerant hybrids adapted to Eastern Africa have reached commercial release. The potential economic value is large. Depending on adoption, resistant hybrids are estimated at $195 million to $678 million in Kenya alone. Comparable value in Ethiopia spans from $245 million to $756 million. Those ranges show why deployment speed matters. Delay leaves high-value gains on the table while losses keep accumulating. Governments have started subsidizing access. Kenya allocated 2 billion shillings, about $15.45 million, to Kenya Seed Company for the 2025 to 2026 season. The program aimed for a 15 to 22% retail seed price reduction, targeting 2.5 million smallholders. Lower entry cost can improve certified seed uptake in high-risk zones, but subsidy must be sustained to outpace reinfection cycles. Digital anti-counterfeit systems are also expanding. Platforms like M-Pedigree and Kakasa e-tags use scratch panels with a unique 12-digit code sent by free SMS for instant authenticity checks. Reported verification usage rose 27% from 2019 to 2020. This does not eliminate fraud alone, but it raises detection probability. Better verification improves trust in formal channels. At the technology frontier, MIT developed unclonable biodegradable silk tags for seed provenance. These tags are designed to be non-hackable and source verifiable. If scaled affordably, they could reduce packaging forgery substantially. The critical challenge remains deployment cost and enforcement consistency. Technology only works when distribution systems adopt it broadly. Financial innovation is moving in parallel. African risk capacity uses sovereign parametric insurance, where payouts trigger from pre-agreed risk indices rather than individual field loss adjustment. In severe events, disbursement can occur within days, often inside a 10-day window. ARC estimates up to $4.40 in avoided losses for every $1 invested. That speed matters when planting windows are short. At farm level, picture-based insurance reduces claim friction. Farmers upload smartphone images, and machine learning tools verify damage patterns. This lowers administrative costs that made traditional crop insurance too expensive for many smallholders. It also accelerates payout pathways when losses cluster geographically. Faster claims can interrupt the credit default cycle. Surveillance infrastructure has improved sharply. From 2014 to 2024, more than 18,735 surveillance data points were logged across 8 countries through the MLN web portal and open data kit workflows. That enables near real-time epidemiological mapping rather than delayed annual snapshots. Better maps improve targeting of seed, scouting, and treatment budgets. Data quality is now a frontline control variable. Gene editing pipelines are also advancing. CIMMYT, Corteva Agriscience, and KALRO are using CRISPR-Cas9 to build direct MLN resistance into elite maize lines. This can bypass parts of conventional breeding timelines that normally take many years. In Kenya, edited lines are moving through national performance evaluations. The science window is opening, but scale-up still requires regulatory and financial alignment. Despite progress, incidence remains high. Across the 2024 to 2026 reporting period, MLN incidence in Eastern Africa held near 20%. Control measures are containing some losses without yet suppressing regional risk to low levels. The system is improving, but not secure. A single failure node can still reactivate widespread. The next frontier risk is Southeast Asia. Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam combine intensive maize systems with large feed demand from poultry and aquaculture sectors. Those conditions are highly conducive to rapid amplification once introduction occurs. One infected seed lot entering a major port could trigger fast intra-regional spread. Early detection and border control are strategic, not administrative. Scenario models quantify that risk. Baseline containment, with about 60% probability, keeps national yield loss under 5% and macroeconomic effects limited. Regional epidemic, at roughly 30% probability, implies 10 to 15% national yield decline. Emergency imports near $185 million, and retail price spikes up to 40%. Stress moves quickly from farms to consumers. Systemic collapse, assigned around 10% probability, is the tail risk. Harvest loss could reach 25 to 40%. Foreign currency outflow could approach $500 million, and acute food insecurity would expand sharply. Tail events are less likely, but far more expensive. Preparedness is judged by tail resilience, not average-year outcomes. So the paradox runs deeper than plant pathology. The same trade integration and logistics speed built to drive growth can accelerate pathogen spread. The same financial institutions built to smooth shocks can, under stress, tighten credit in ways that extend epidemic cycles. Biological risk and financial risk are now functionally inseparable in this system. Treating them separately guarantees policy failure. Breaking the cycle requires integrated design. Credit must remain liquid during biological crises. Seed regulation must be harmonized across borders. Counterfeit channels must be suppressed through both law and verification technology. Without those changes, every outbreak will re-enter through the same economic weak points. The first design shift is temporal. Most agricultural lending still assumes shocks are seasonal and recovery is linear. MLN behaves differently, with recurrence risk that persists across many planting cycles if seed quality and vector pressure are not simultaneously controlled. Financing products built for one-season weather losses are poorly matched to multi-year pathogen dynamics. When product design and biological reality diverge, default risk is structurally mispriced. A second shift concerns governance scope. Pathogens move across borders faster than national approval systems move resistant genetics. If neighboring countries maintain separate, multi-year release pipelines for similar ecologies, farmers in one jurisdiction remain exposed to delays solved next door. That mismatch creates avoidable losses and encourages informal seed flows. Regional harmonization is not a bureaucratic preference, it is a disease control tool. Third, risk intelligence must be shared in actionable formats. Surveillance portals can map spread, but they only change outcomes if credit, insurance, and seed distribution systems are connected to those maps in real time. Otherwise, data stays descriptive rather than preventive. The practical goal is to trigger capital and seed movement before outbreak curves steepen. Prevention economics depend on speed, not only on accuracy. Fourth, anti-counterfeit enforcement needs market incentives, not only penalties. Farmers buy from informal channels because those channels are cheaper and available when formal supply is delayed or unaffordable. Verification tools like SMS tagging help, but adoption scales fastest when verified seed is competitively priced and reliably stocked. Enforcement without affordability shifts risk rather than reducing it. Sustainable compliance requires credible alternatives at point of purchase. Finally, adaptation strategy has to treat biological resilience as a public good investment. Training, sanitation training, and rapid payout insurance all reduce regional outbreak probability beyond any single farm. Co-financing frameworks should reward collective risk reduction, not just individual recovery after collapse. If policy waits for losses to materialize before acting, the system remains trapped in reaction mode. The objective is to pay earlier and lose less, instead of paying later and losing repeatedly. MLN exposed the hard truth that applies well beyond maize. In tightly linked food systems, biology and finance can reinforce each other in either direction. If they reinforce failure, outbreaks become persistent and expensive. If they reinforce resilience, the same regions can convert scientific progress into durable food security. The deciding variable is whether institutions are designed to move as fast as the disease.